Welcome to Connecting the Dots, an Amici podcast presented by me, George Mingozzi-Marsh, where each episode I meet with an artist and chat about their community, collaborations, and how these connections continue to shape the artists they are today. If you're watching the video version of this podcast at Amici.Art, then keep watching at the end for some bonus footage from my studio visit. In this episode, I speak with Yeni Mao, an artist who I've known and worked with for a number of years. And we recorded this episode in his Mexico City studio in 2025. As this episode goes out, I'll actually be back with Yeni in Mexico City for Art Week 2026. Yeni is of Chinese heritage, was born in Canada, but grew up mainly in the US and lived and worked as an artist in New York City before relocating to Mexico City. And his predominantly sculptural practice explores diaspora communities, subcultures, and outsider communities. And since living and working in Mexico City, his practice has thrived and he's found a new audience, both in Mexico and internationally. Hi.
Hi.
Nice to talk to you.
Nice to see you.
Obviously, we know each other.
Uh-huh.
So it'd be great to kind of, I think, recap a lot of the stuff that we've spoken about previously, but tell a little bit of your story and your journey to getting here. I want to focus in particularly on this idea of the communities that shape us and the communities we kind of surround ourselves.
Uh-huh.
I know that kind of a forming moment or a kind of forming influence on you and your artistic practice was the kind of musical subcultures that you were interested in as a kind of a younger man. And could you maybe talk a little bit about how that maybe shaped an attitude and then coming on to maybe shaping an aesthetic later on in your...
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to approach it in these ideas of communities, which I think is really important. And I do think that there's a lot of entry points to my practice, and I'm seen as, and I have been part of a lot of different communities.
Yeah.
But the whole music thing, which is, of course, music has always been a defining thing in my life, but it was really how I grew up, and it was really like about coming to a certain age where understanding my aesthetic formations were formed when I was a kid,
Yeah.
you know, in my, not only a teenager, but in my 20s, when I was soft and pliable, and those things were really, grew up in a small town that was a college town, so there was a lot of parties and a lot of like punk rock shows and stuff, and there was always this sort of sense of, or there was always this understanding of the outlying hegemony of capitalism and all this kind of stuff because of this influence of punk rock. And then that's sort of emphasized by the fact that I'm Chinese and I'm gay, and so it was sort of like I'm even more outside of society.
So you're kind of drawn to these outsider subcultures.
Yeah, and so like, yeah, because I was almost put there, like I didn't have a choice. And so that was like I was high school in my 80s and college in the 90s. And so that was really a time where it was really post-punk stuff, and there was a lot of influence from England of the industrial music scene there, led by Fabian Gristle and Chris Mingozzi and all this stuff, Justice Peerage. And
Interesting that that's a kind of an art-music crossover moment as well, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
We maybe hadn't seen...
Yeah, they kind of sort of like, it was more like sound work.
Yeah.
And you know, of course, entering it through more poppy things like New Order and The Cure and stuff, but then it was really exciting to find people that sort of opened the medium up that was outside of pop music. And I've always like sort of respected this idea that, as far as in art, like an object can be utilitarian or not, or that the definition of music or an object of art can have sort of like a wider stance and like move in different circles, much how like I move in different circles, you know. So yeah, and body modification, and at the time tattoos were crazy. Like if you got a tattoo, you were some sort of...
Excluding yourself.
Yeah, you're some sort of crazy person. And now, of course, everybody has them. But that was I looked at that a lot. I had a teacher at the Art Institute of Chicago. It was actually a body modification course that there was this intersection between.
You took a body modification course?
Yeah, there was a body modification class, which I thought was really cool, and it was a huge influence on me. She's still like my spirit animal. I want to be her when I grow up. Yeah, she taught. She specialized in voodoo and Haitian art, and she was super cool.
Amazing.
Like, teachers are really important.
Yeah, so important. I mean, I think that's. I've talked about this in previous interviews. Like those linchpin people in our lives that maybe at that moment you didn't realize that they like opened either literally like gave you opportunities or just like opened a door in your mind to like, oh, this is possible, or I can think in this way.
Absolutely. It's all about access and opportunity and inclusion and representation. Yeah. Like I feel like all of everything I am is due to like maybe 5 people. Yeah. You know, that sort of open worlds up to me.
So moving from this kind of more suburban, Chicago, outside Chicago community that you're a part of into New York, that was your kind of next leap?
Well, so like I was born in Canada, I grew up in Michigan in this little town that I was just talking about. And then I went to school in Chicago. And then afterwards, I guess because of this idea of mediums being sort of transferable, I was also sort of hated the art world, and I went and apprenticed in a foundry in California for 2 years, just to like learn the craft instead of getting my master's. So I was in San Francisco for like a couple years, and then New York, and I was in New York for 20 years or something before.
And then kind of New York, which I suppose at that time was, well, the center of so many things, but certainly, if not the center of the contemporary art world, then a center of the contemporary art world. Like, how was it to be in New York in that moment, and like, how did you find yourself? Like, who were your people? What was your community? Like,
well, I hated it. I mean, like, so like I moved after school, I went and apprenticed in the foundry. I was like a kid, in my early 20s in California with all the access to all this metalworking stuff. And I made a really amazing body of work, which I don't know where any of those works are. And I moved to New York to be an artist. And then I was sort of hooked up, like my boss in the foundry, his cousin or brother I stayed with, and he was in the art world. Like he was part of the gallery system and stuff. Right. And I didn't understand it, and I didn't understand how the social aspect of it, how to make ends meet, and so
that kind of networking bit, like that, kind of integrating social and professional.
Yeah, and on a really practical level, like how I even paid rent. Like, how do I work in this coffee shop and work for artists and sell work? And I tried for like a year, and then I was like, I hate this. And so I stopped doing work. I stopped doing artwork for a couple times in my life, and that was like the first time. And I stopped for a couple years and it was always going into fabrication. And I think now it's cloudy, but I think at that time, that's when I started working for a design build architecture firm. Right, yeah. And that was also a huge influence on like how I make stuff. And
yeah. Mm-hmm. And so at what point did your kind of current concerns in your practice start to come in? Was that still when you were in New York, when you were starting to think about, a diaspora community, starting to think about some of these sort of subcultures and...
Yeah, I mean, I think that this... So I didn't really actually answer your question about like who I was hanging out with. So I was there in New York for a long time, so it varied. Like, and I did eventually start back doing art, and there really was no sort of Asian art community, and so I was even more outside of things. And basically, all my friends were African American at that time. I showed at a gallery, was run by the only African American woman, and so that was who I was hanging out with. But I mean, I was also in my 20s, so I was going to a lot of clubs and stuff. So a lot of that, a lot of that stuff. And so my concerns then, I think the thing was in the United States, it became, I think I realized after a while that it became and over concerned. I was over concerned about diasporic communities, and I was over concerned about my own representation, and I was over concerned about those things. And New York being the center of such a market, it was really difficult to sort of hold your own and have your own vision without all those things being an influence on you. And so I think that was, that affected my practice there, I think. And I realized that I had to sort of leave that to sort of have a more true vision of like what I really wanted to do, and still sort of address those things, but use sort of outsiderness or diasporicness to as more of a platform to talk about more abstract ideas, as if I was a white artist, you know. So I feel like maybe it took me a lot longer because of my own confusion and lack of opportunity to sort of figure out what I was doing, you know. But yeah, the work I was making in New York, I mean, it was cool. It was good. You know, it was good. It was good. But, you know, I didn't have as much opportunity to make sculpture there. So it was a lot more, I was really more thinking about media and representation, and I was doing a lot more 2D work. And so more delving into those sort of like, these sort of ideas of self-mythology is really what I was taught. It was really what I was more concentrating on. But self-mythology through like kung fu films or something like that. I mean, I made sculpture too, and the sculpture I made actually was really strong, I think. And a lot of people say that my practice really changed after I moved to Mexico. But if I look at these old sculptures from 2010 or 2000, whatever, I feel like they're the same. I think there's.
I mean, I think undeniably there has been a change, like an aesthetic change in your sculpture since you moved to. I mean, well, let's move on to that. So you moved to Mexico in what year?
2014 or 15, something like that.
And what was it that brought you here in the first instance?
Racism. But basically, I went to Casa Wabi. Like I had been I had made this realization that that I was just talking about, that, I think I need to get out of New York to really figure out who I was. Like it got me, New York really built me up to a certain level, and then I realized like, this is not of my needs anymore. Yeah. And so for the last 5 years I was in New York, at least, I was like trying to figure out where to move. And I had this opportunity to go to Casa Wabi in the coast of Oaxaca. And so I went there, and at the time, international artists, were there for 3 months, and the national artists were only there for a month or so. And so I met maybe 3 turnovers of artists and they all lived in Mexico City. And so they sort of helped me move to Mexico City. Just like with practicalities like rent and stuff, and how to pay bills and things like this, how much money I would need. And I felt really lucky to create that community that I was not sure I had felt in New York, because there was so much competition. And
so the fact that it was a smaller artistic community here, felt that you were able to kind of make connections.
Well, that I made friends that were looking out for me.
Yeah.
I mean, and it was smaller then. So yeah, maybe it was smaller, but it was more like, I met people that I feel like I can depend on in a completely different culture, you know? And so when I moved here, I felt like it wasn't moving here cold. Like I felt like I had people.
And it kind of stepping outside of this, I guess, kind of world and career that you had built for yourself in New York, where there were, I'm guessing, a certain amount of expectations about who you were and the work you were producing, into somewhere where perhaps there was fewer eyes on you, or you felt like you could express yourself differently, or sort of take a step back and build up from the ground? Was there a sense of that?
Yeah,
I mean, or was there a kind of a continued momentum where you felt like you went straight from like, this is what I'm doing here, but it just carried on rolling?
Well, I think that it was like, I mean, it took me a few years to sort of like get myself together in the midst of all this transition. And I had a modicum of success in New York, but it's so expensive that I was really operating a construction company. I had a construction company. We were doing metal fabrication, and we started doing bigger and bigger jobs. And so that there was, again, like a break in my practice where I was like making stuff, but on the side, but it wasn't like my main income. So as far as like the work itself goes, a lot of the techniques that I'm using now and a lot of the interests that are in the work now are things that I sort of eschewed in New York because those were my work. And so I was trying to keep my work separate from my work.
Yeah, okay.
And I wasn't giving enough props to all the knowledge that I had learned in the craft industries that I was working in.
Yeah.
And so that was like sort of a big epiphany where that was a source of knowledge that I had that I could utilize, and that was actually my interest. Whereas it was always being told, like I was telling myself and being told from outside, that those are separate ideas.
I think also there was a moment in the sort of 90s and early 2000s where skills-based practice and craft-based practice was kind of frowned upon a little bit. It was
absolutely, like a painted
like,
2x4, and this sort of like ironic, very American sort of ironic, like it's all about the ideas and the concepts.
Yeah.
And I have concepts, but it's also like I am also super interested in this idea of this idea of making, and which is, I think, was lost at that time. It was really lost. Like craft was really looked down upon.
Yeah.
Now it's definitely not,
And it's definitely not in Mexico City either. Like I feel like Mexico has this culture of people make stuff here. Like the art is there's quite a sort of community of sculpture, but also, you walk down the street and people are fixing things. They're making do, they're constructing things.
Yeah.
They're kind of, there's this kind of ramshackle, do-it-yourself aesthetic that Mexico City has. Yeah. That maybe kind of suggests.
I mean, that is inspiring. Like just to see that if there's a door gate or something, to see that someone made it instead of bought it at Home Depot, or bought it at Home Depot and cut it up and re-welded it together in some way. Yeah. I do love that about Mexico. I think that's a really good thing. I mean, in the art world itself, I don't know. I mean, that goes into this whole other part of Mexican art history that that maybe I think craft, and as far as like contemporary art in Mexico, is maybe now it's like following and coming into its own. But I think a lot of the younger artists here, like they have stuff made, so it's still under this sort of 90s, 2000s idea of conceptualism. Yeah. I mean, I think it's coming out of it, but it's there is definitely a self-awareness of craft. Yeah.
And I think the kind of other interesting development has been that obviously in your time here, your practice has grown, but your kind of career has grown, and also interest in your career outside of Mexico City has grown. So you've kind of moved away from the United States, only to find there is a kind of a growing and developing interest in what you're doing in the United States. Yeah. Like what's your...
I have no idea. I know what you're trying to ask. I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, I just knew I had to leave. I knew I had to just get out of the market and just sort of my friend told me, it's like a jazz term, it's called woodshedding. Like I just had to get into my own shit and just figure that out. And I think that there's an interest in my work now because it's more true to what my own vision is, my true vision. I'm allowing myself to explore things like spiritualism and poetics and things like this that I am building that I wasn't really doing before. I'm also I was also an anomaly. I'm an anomaly here, and I was an anomaly in the States. But it's like in the States, it's like you're sort of told. It's like especially if you're Asian, it's like you're assumed that oh no, you are American, you're part of this, when in fact like you're not. And so there's like this, you're still this outsiderness, but no one's considering that because it's like, no, you're fine.
Yeah.
You know. And here, I mean, even if I get Mexican citizenship, I'll always be a foreigner. And
Yeah.
and I mean, I was like the only person doing this kind of work because I mean, I come from some other completely different school, so I was the only other person doing this sort of work. And like the first works that I were doing here, like they're seductive aesthetically, and so I think that worked in my favor as well. Yeah, so yeah, that's. But yeah, I don't know, like the reason my attention has grown to me. I'm happy of it, you know.
I suppose I wasn't like necessarily looking for a reason, but more kind of how it feels that you've stepped away from somewhere where maybe you had to be defined by who you are to a place where I don't know.
Well, it feels weird because everything that the art world loves to talk about, borderlessness and all this kind of stuff, and it's all crap. Like it's all still based on that. Like it's all definitely based on that, and I'm still having those problems. Like I'm always on the wrong side of the border. Like in the States, I was a Canadian citizen, so it said in my bio that I was from Canada, which I have no connection with, and so that was ridiculous. And so there was a lot of opportunities I didn't get there, and I certainly wasn't a Canadian artist. I couldn't get any grants from Canada because I didn't have any presence. And then I got my American citizenship while I've been in Mexico, and there's been a couple opportunities that I've missed out in the States, you know, and actually not a couple. There's been several that I know are really straight ahead. Well, your practice isn't based in the States anymore, and then just sort of more vibey. Like people are like, in the States are like, he has a career in Mexico. And in Mexico, people are like, he has this big career in the States. But so it's still like this negotiation of being in between and
professional outsider.
Yeah, I mean, like a professional outsider. And so it's interesting that like now there's like my career is also like, it's like all the countries that are surrounding the States, but it's still not in the States really that much, you know.
So, you know, what is next? What's your kind of...
Well, the States, I think.
That's it, right? Conquering the States.
I mean, you know...
You're waiting for the trade tariffs to come in.
Yeah, I'm waiting for I'm waiting for them to tax the shit out of me. I think that Asia, Latin America, and Europe all operate in definitely different ways. Yeah. And I am an American artist, you know, that's where I was raised, and that's where my whole attitude is from. And so that is all my ideas stem from that. Like, that's just where I'm from.
Do you see yourself going back?
I do not. But I'm hoping that like the art world sort of puts their money where their mouth is as far as like talking about borderlessness. Because I think that people are more fluid than that, for sure, and especially artists. And yeah, definitely, I think people are more fluid. I don't know how to say it. People are just more fluid than that. People's existence are more fluid than being locked to one country, especially in the new world.
I mean, I think that's great, you know, in this kind of time of increasing isolationism, to try and look for a more kind of open and more kind of global approach to making work and showing work.
Yeah. You know, it's like making sculpture, it's like you want to be supported by the institutions. Yeah. And so you need to be in a place where the institutions
can see
you and will buy you. And, you know, and so like there's been some smattering of that outside of the States, but, you know, and I don't want to be like rah the States at all, but like it's like that's where there's tons more institutions that all have small budgets, but they do collect. And so I think, as I said, like I do think that making art comes with opportunity. And so for me to move to like the next step of not just my career, but of my practice, like being able to make bigger things or weirder things or things out of other materials, to really explore that stuff, I need the studio to run in a certain way, and I need those opportunities. So that's the professional struggle that goes behind the struggle of the practice.
Yeah.
You know. So yeah, that's hopefully what's next.
2025 and onwards,
Yeah.
US domination.
Yeah, U.S. domination. I mean, it's also like I try not to put that much pressure on it because it's like I am no spring chicken, and so as long as I just try to remember that, like the soul of what I'm working on, and just do my stuff, and hopefully people will like my stuff.
Perfect. Well, thanks for talking to me.
Thanks for inviting me.
So do you kind of go collecting objects that you find interesting and curious?
Yeah, like it's sort of like combined. Like
You don't know.
Like these are fabricated butt plugs, and this is something I made, and an experiment, and then like obviously like this is bought, and all these things are bought. So there's sort of like these crossed lines between what I make and what I find, and it's all sort of like this self-reflection on what I'm interested in. Like even something as simple as like this little piece of volcanic rock that's like so nice and square and just from the sidewalk or something. This is cobra skin with the head cut off, and it's basically cut finely and glued onto this metal structure. And yeah, it's real cobra skin. So like these were, I did want these to have this, the first idea was a handrail. And then I'm thinking a lot in the practice or in the work about things that are repulsive and pretty at the same time, things that you want to touch and things that might repulse you. So in the most simple way, it's, it's a handrail with creepy snakeskin on it. And then I think they're also kind of motorcycle-y, and they also suggest like, this other part that I'm thinking about a lot, like this equation between the natural body or the organic body and building systems or architecture. And so like maybe these tubes are part of some sort of like internal system that works inside the buildings that we inhabit. This is also from the last show. There was a series of these that I'm excited to work on more of these. They're volcanic rocks or different kinds of rocks. Like there was a piece of turquoise and a piece of quartz, and they're dipped in wax, and then all this is rope dipped in wax, and then the whole thing is cast together. So it only exists in our reality as a solid piece. So there's like this line between like the most primal materials that move through craft and industrialization. And I think that this series sort of like really addresses that on the head.